Hello, this is a presentation on auxins, created for the purpose of selling them off as the best plant hormone.
Auxin is a plant hormone responsible for the elongation of cells in a plant and is involved in the regulation of plant growth.
First, we're going to begin by telling you about auxin structure. The structure obviously varies with different auxin compounds, but for it to be considered an auxin, it requires that aromatic ring and a carboxylic acid functional group. Now, the most common of auxins is called indole 3-acetic acid. Many textbooks or lab reports will abbreviate it to IAA. So if you see that, just remember that it's indole 3-acetic acid. It's the most prevalent of all other auxins, and frequently, if someone refers to an auxin, they're generally referring to this one. But it's also good to keep in mind that there are other auxin compounds. The three other natural auxins are 4-quinidole 3-acetic acid, 2-phenylacetic acid, and indole 3-butyric acid. Additionally, there are synthetic auxins, and many of them are used for weed killers, I believe. Here are the structural images of the three other natural auxins. You can see each of them has the aromatic ring and the carboxylic acid. Now that you understand what auxin is made of, you can understand a little bit of how it functions. Because auxins are hormones, they have to travel around the plant. The method in which auxins are moved is called polar auxin transport. The thing to remember about this is that a plant's supply of auxin moves only down the stem. The unidirectional transport yields the name polar. Basically, a carrier protein at one end of a cell receives the hormone and takes it down to the other end of the cell where it can be passed along to carrier proteins in a different cell. But something interesting to remember about auxin only traveling downstem is that experiments have been done to see if its transport had something to do with gravity, and they found out that it didn't. A plant placed upside down still had auxin transport travel down the stem, but it was literally transported in the upward direction, but it still traveled downstem against gravity.
Functions of auxin include the stimulation of stem elongation, root growth, and cell differentiation and branching. It also regulates development of fruit and enhances apical dominance. Auxin plays a role in phototrophism and gravitrophism, and also promotes xylem differentiation. Xylem differentiation is a series of changes that occur in vascular plant tissue during development, resulting in their specialization.
Okay, cell elongation. It's auxin's main job. It's literally the elongation of the cell. What happens is the auxin stimulates the cell's plasma membrane to start pumping hydrogen ions out of the cytoplasm into the cell wall. When this happens, the cell wall's pH decreases, and these enzymes called expansins are activated to break apart the wall's hydrogen bonds. When the hydrogen bonds are broken, the cell wall becomes more elastic. And as the wall becomes more elastic, the cell is also taking in water, which pushes the cell to elongate. This here is just a diagram on cell elongation. You can see the auxin on the right-hand side stimulating the hydrogen ion pump, and that the hydrogen ions trigger the expansins. You can also see the cellulose molecule broken apart after the expansins, and water stretching up the cell in the picture on the right, so to speak. Now, why auxin-induced cell elongation is important to you in your prospective plant. Cell elongation allows for phototropism, the plant's adaptation to bend towards the sunlight. This is something you want in your plant because it will be able to absorb sunlight and thus be better at photosynthesis. You need auxin to be able to aid phototropism. But anyways, just to give you a bit of an explanation of how phototropism works. As auxin concentrates on one side of a plant, that side elongates faster than the other side, so that the plant begins to lean towards the shorter side, and thus the sunlight. This is a diagram explaining phototropism. The little purple dots are made to resemble auxin. As the sun is perfectly overhead, there is an even distribution of auxin, but as the sun moves further and further to the right side, the auxin begins to congregate on the left-hand side of the plant, which causes that side to elongate and bend towards the sunlight. Another thing that auxin helps with is called apical dominance. Apical dominance is basically a plant spending more energy growing up rather than out. Auxin travels to the auxiliary buds and inhibits them from growing so that the plant focuses on growing vertically rather than horizontally. Fir trees represent apical dominance because their cone shape shows the area at the top of the plant grows faster than the side branches do. There are just some additional benefits benefits you would get if your plant contained auxin. Induces cell division, influences differentiation of xylem, and helps developing seeds start off on a path of fruit growth. Okay, now instead of simply just talking about how great auxin is, it's going to get kind of a comparison to some of your other options for plant hormones. For cytokinesis, which is a part of cellular division, a major function of cytokinins, it's necessary for auxin to be present. If auxin isn't there, the cells aren't going to divide. So, even if you were considering cytokinins for your plant hormone, you are still going to need to have our hormone auxin. Cytokinins also require auxin in cellular differentiation. Their concentrations determine whether or not shoots or roots will form. In this slide, we compare auxin to ethylene. Ethylene is a hormone that controls fruit ripening, but it also depends on auxin concentrations. So if you even think of using ethylene in your plant, you're going to need my hormone too. The concentrations of auxin determine how well ethylene is able to function. At higher concentrations, plants flower better because they trigger the synthesis of ethylene. Also, auxin concentrations determine plant abscission. Abscission is basically when a plant sheds its leaves. The auxin plays into the ability of ethylene to function yet again. If there's less auxin in the plant, still requiring at least some level of auxin though, the cells on the abscission layer of the plant become more sensitive to ethylene and are thus able to drop.
We believe that auxin is the best hormone for your plant. Although other hormones perform other important tasks beyond what auxin does on its own, many require the presence of auxin to function properly. Cytokinesis requires auxin for cell division. Gibberellins require auxin for fruit to set, and ethanol requires particular auxin concentrations to be triggered.